Kits. So now, let's apply the full facts so that we can look at these questions. I'm going to show you a timeline here and what we are learning in this case. We're going to look at the recent secrecy, the failures by the Trump administration, why this case has been a failure for justice and governance and transparency, and the history helps reveal links to the current issues, the questions facing Trump as president and as a civilian, because before he was president, he had a sordid history with Epstein. And when we're done walking you through this timeline, you're going to see why so many questions endure to officials linked to Trump, to officials carrying out his priorities at DOJ, all of which has drawn this backlash.
The current DOJ under Pam Bondi is covering up crimes, very serious crimes.
Last week, she put out a 2-page memo effectively declaring the Epstein case closed, which is convenient given the speculation that Trump might be in the so-called client list.
3 times I voted for this man. This is by far the biggest fumble of the administration they've had thus far.
It's indefensible. It's indefensible that the answers aren't there when so much was promised.
He and his administration keep acting like they've got something to hide.
The Epstein case has many details and open questions. Our timeline today focuses on the key facts and developments, starting in March 2005, when local police in Palm Beach, Florida, began a probe into Epstein, investigating reports of abusing victims as young as 14. The local case led to Epstein's indictment for a single count of soliciting prostitution in 2006, not the more serious alleged conduct. In fact, the lead detective in the Palm Beach office referred the case to the FBI to look at the more serious crimes, and those federal investigators began probing allegations. In 2008, Epstein reached a deal with the Bush administration's federal prosecutors to take that local Florida conviction for soliciting prostitution with an adult and a minor. Epstein got a lenient, short prison sentence and an unusual agreement that the Bush DOJ would not prosecute Epstein further, or 4 of his co-conspirators, or any others. Bush DOJ prosecutors also agreed to keep the deal secret and not inform Epstein's victims about it. A judge later found the Bush DOJ's secrecy deal was illegal, violating those victims' rights. So the facts show from the start, Epstein got this unusual protection from the government in this period, a Republican administration, Bush. And Epstein was a rich, powerful figure. He had ties to people in business and politics. He hired a Republican-connected lawyer, former independent counsel Ken Starr, and served just 1 year in that deal. Now, another 9 years went by, and then the Miami Herald reported an Epstein expose on the allegations of his conduct and that Bush-era prosecutor who cut the sweetheart deal. That investigative report gained traction, partly because of a tie to Trump, who promoted the very prosecutor, Alex Acosta, to his cabinet. The headline at the time hammering how a now Trump official gave a serial sex abuser the deal of a lifetime. And that public pressure from the Herald drove a new federal probe. Internal DOJ reviews would show Acosta had poor judgment in the case, and that the blanket immunity offers for Epstein and others were just indefensible, leading to a fairly swift federal indictment of Epstein on far more serious sex trafficking charges. And the pressure drove the original prosecutor Trump had promoted, Acosta, to resign around this time. And in a key decision, a judge denied Epstein bail, forcing him to be incarcerated before any trial. It was just over a month later, August 2019, when Epstein was found dead in his cell. The situation was suspicious. Officials there broke several protocols. Epstein was a high-profile detainee. He'd been placed on suicide watch, which was then quickly lifted. Guards failed to do required inspections the very night of his death. And a lot of questions were hanging over all of this. So let's go even further ahead, all the way up to 2019 and what happened after that. Because key videos went missing. Trump Attorney General Barr even admitting the prison made mistakes then, but claiming that he personally reviewed prison video which showed no one entering the cell. And with Epstein dead, prosecutors turned to a co-conspirator who might have benefited from that original Florida case being shut down, what I told you about. They went ahead and indicted Ghislaine Maxwell for helping Epstein's sex trafficking, a case brought by a career prosecutor, Maureen Comey, daughter of former FBI Director Comey. And her work continued on when the Biden administration took over. She won Maxwell's conviction and this 20-year prison sentence. Then, during the 2024 campaign, the questions and theories about Epstein's crimes and special treatment were heating up on the right. It was a problem for Trump, given that he promoted the original prosecutor, that he oversaw the DOJ, which failed to answer questions or have transparency about whatever happened in that prison cell. So Trump tried to go on offense, vowing to declassify and release Epstein's files. And his attorney general took over that message and advanced it in office, now infamously claiming that she had the client list on her desk, which she later contradicted because shortly after, the DOJ released an alternate video from the prison. But the key video that shows Epstein's cell door is either lost or hidden. It's never been released. And Bondi released the now infamous memo that said they wouldn't provide any other Epstein documents. So Bondi went from saying there was a client list to there wasn't. She was lying then or lying now. The DOJ memo then said there was no other Epstein info that was going to be released, which ignited that firestorm of criticism we all lived through. And given the broken vows, that couldn't hold. Trump soon contradicted his own DOJ's memo and saying he would try to get grand jury material released, but those are limited transcripts. A lot of the big Epstein information is in the Trump DOJ. They could release it anytime. One judge has denied this. And as the Trump administration's contradicting claims drew more heat on its secrecy, the DOJ then sent this former Trump criminal defense attorney to interview Maxwell in prison and then transferred her to a better prison, an apparent reward for the one person doing any time for Epstein's indicted federal crimes. In July, Trump's DOJ also fired the top prosecutor who won the case against Maxwell, Comey, an unusual ousting of a career prosecutor with no public explanation. So what does this timeline show? That Epstein got help and special treatment and sometimes unlawful benefits from the very federal government that claimed to be investigating him. It happened under the Bush administration, with officials later promoted by Trump. The Trump DOJ only picked up the case in the first term after journalists reported those revelations. Epstein's unusual death met with total secrecy by the first Trump term, and the prosecutor who busted Epstein's co-conspirator ousted in the second term, while Trump and other officials made false, sometimes knowingly false statements about this public history. This is a damning account of President Trump's approach to this case in government. Now, this is a serious governing problem for President Trump and the DOJ and obviously the impacted victims. Even if we learn nothing else about this, it's an open scandal for this administration. And then there are the glaring and inconvenient facts that go back even further before Trump was in government, before the lengthy timeline we just saw. Because as a civilian, Trump had a long relationship with Epstein, who had bought property near Mar-a-Lago, socializing with Trump, engaging in activities, and both men then referring to Epstein's sexual controversies. The two men partied together. They appeared in public and before cameras. This is footage from a Mar-a-Lago event in 1992. Epstein went to Trump's wedding in 1993. And while Trump famously likes his own jet with Trump branding, he found the time and reasons to fly on Epstein's private jet at least 7 times, per the New York Times. Trump photographed with both Epstein and Maxwell in 2000, again at Mar-a-Lago. And the Journal reported about how Trump drew those bawdy sexual references in a birthday card for Epstein, citing, quote, wonderful secrets. Trump denies this and is suing the Journal over it. He now claims his Epstein friendship was shorter than reported, that they clashed over an employee Epstein had poached from Mar-a-Lago, while other accounts say Epstein was a Mar-a-Lago member until 2007, over a year after that original indictment we showed you. Trump breaking the vow to release more Epstein files, but he's also in them, according to recent Journal reporting. And as for Epstein, he was secretive about any time that the two men might have spent with minors when pressed under oath.
You ever socialized with Donald Trump in the presence of females under the age of 18?
Though I'd like to answer that question, at least today, I'm going to have to assert my Fifth Sixth and 14th Amendment right, sir?
Legally, these social links alone are not evidence of a crime. They are evidence of a conflict of interest, the kind of link that requires a judge or prosecutor to recuse from a case. But Trump has been doing the opposite, commenting and intervening, his DOJ's actions on Epstein repeatedly putting secrecy over facts, politics over accountability, and, as we saw in the recent controversy, a special transfer and leniency for an actual sex trafficker over justice for the victims. There has been a lot of talk about Epstein, and at the core, this is a case that matters so much to the many people, many victims whose lives were forever altered by Epstein and Maxwell. But you don't need even more Epstein documents, though people are pursuing them, or more facts to understand the raw outline of this case. Some of it predates Trump, with Bush-era prosecutors cutting a deal with a powerful person and cutting out the victims from even learning about it. But much of it involves Trump, from the personal social links to a government that he is overseeing, that after all of the talk and claims for justice and demands for truth in this sex trafficking case, the big thing the Trump administration has done is continue the secrecy, continue to cut the victims out, and, most astoundingly, help and serve an Epstein sex trafficking co-conspirator over truth or justice for the victims.
This afternoon, proof of an age-old principle that you can fool some of the people all of the time and all of the people some of the time, but you cannot. You cannot fool all of the people all of the time. Donald Trump, take notes, because right now the American people are mad at you. Call it a reckoning if you want, not just for Trump, but for those lawmakers who've hitched their wagons to the MAGA movement. Tomorrow will make it 7 months since Trump's second term began. I know it feels like 11 years. His report card, though, is so bad it's going to need a signature from a parent. Overall, according to Pew, his approval rating is in the dumps, with just 38% of all Americans on his side. That compares to 60% who disapprove of Donald Trump's performance as president. It's a near record low for him. On tariffs, which are the signature tool of his economic masterminding, he's 23 points underwater on tariffs. On foreign policy, amid the pomp and circumstance, amid a flurry of meetings with European leaders, Trump is 14 points underwater right now. And on his administration's handling of the Jeffrey Epstein controversy, largely ginned up by his own coalition and base of core supporters, Pew says just 25% of all Americans approve of how he's handling that. And it compares to 70% who do not approve of how Donald Trump is handling the Jeffrey Epstein files. Before you write any of that off as a small matter, go beyond the numbers. Look at what elected Republicans are hearing about the so-called Epstein files. This is from Wyoming. Wyoming is a state Donald Trump won by nearly 50 points a few months ago.
I don't know if that vote's going to come up on the floor, but what a lot of people don't realize is that is for the courts to decide.
So you're not going to give us an answer on that?
It is for the courts to decide. Those files are sealed. It is for the courts to decide whether the files can be released.
And they're declining
it is a separation of powers issue. It is for the courts to decide.
Grand jury transcripts aren't going to get released, right?
I can't.
There seems to be a lot of sentiment in the House, on the right and the left, to see what's in those Jeffrey Epstein files. Do you support the release of those files?
I support. It's up to the courts to decide. It is up to the courts to decide.
Thank you.
It's up to the courts to decide. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
It's cute when MAGA is for judges after they're against them, and then for them again. That was Congresswoman Harriet Hageman. She replaced Liz Cheney, being called a sycophant by her own constituents. Here's more from her town hall.
We have to have mail-in ballots. My question to you was, how do you feel personally of stripping Americans of those foundational tools of mail-in ballots?
Tools?
Mail-in ballots.
Mail-in ballots are not foundational tools.
You just said we have to protect it, but it's not foundational.
You're fully capable of exercising your right to vote without a mail-in ballot. You are absolutely fully capable of exercising your right to vote without a ballot.
Again, Wyoming is a state Trump won by almost 50 points. It is hard to find a non-Republican person in Wyoming. And that's how her town hall went. And it's just the latest example of a Republican lawmaker being confronted by her constituents. It's certainly not an isolated incident, though, especially when voters turn on the TV and see stuff like this. A federal and militarized takeover of Washington, D.C., our nation's capital, in the name of stopping crime, or masked federal agents in the name of ICE, handcuffing and seizing, sometimes violently, people off the streets in American towns and cities, big and small. And while the Trump administration, in its own way, has celebrated these images, Kristi Noem said she loves watching ICE videos, the American people do not feel the same way. A new Reuters poll shows this, quote, just 42% of respondents approve of Trump's performance on crime, and 43% thought he was doing a good job on immigration policy. On all policies, Trump's support came overwhelmingly from Republicans. So again, what about those Republican allies in Congress? Watch what happened to Congresswoman Elise Stefanik in Plattsburgh, New York yesterday, inside her own district, as she reportedly considers a run for New York governor.
Our Congresswoman from New York 21, Elise Stefanik.
That's what it sounded like outside the Government Center building in Plattsburgh Monday. Stefanik stepped up to address the crowd twice. Both times, the protesters booed her.
The Trump agenda and getting booed off stage, twice for Ms. Stefanik at least, is where we start today with some of our favorite experts and friends. Puck News chief political columnist, MSNBC national affairs analyst John Heilemann is here. Also joining us, the host of the Fast Politics podcast, Vanity Fair special correspondent, MSNBC political analyst Molly Jong-Fast, fresh off a triumphant appearance on the Bill Maher program. And to round out our panel, host of the Bulwark podcast, MSNBC political analyst Tim Miller is here as well. Let me start with you, Tim Miller, on, we have data, and as Matt Dowd says, when you have data and you can match it with anecdotal evidence of people having intense enough feelings, one, to show up at a town hall, and two, to express their animosity, it's information, right? It doesn't predetermine the outcome of any election, it's not suggesting that Trump won't regain popularity or rise in the polls, but it is more than a snapshot 7 months in. And to me, it illustrates something that I worried about in the first few weeks, that the freneticism would read as energy and work in progress. It seems that at month 7, the freneticism and chaos are clearly not matched with the perception that the results are what people voted for. What is your sense of where Trump is in this moment?
I think that's right. Look, it's not like he's in free fall. You don't want to overstate it, but for a lot of voters, they're not seeing the change in their economic circumstances that they wanted. And then certain types of voters have complaints about certain types of things that he's been doing, that in some cases upsetting his own base on issues like Epstein, in some cases upsetting it's kind of libertarian-ish independent voters with the immigration regime. In some cases, just more of his non-political voters or hoping grocery prices would go down, and they've gone up. And so you kind of have this confluence of factors of the political winds moving away from him. I mean, I promised myself I was not going to obsess over polls in 2025. Like, we're a long way away from the next election. We've had a few poll misses recently. But the dramatic nature of some of those numbers, I mean, no matter how, maybe they are off by 10, 15 points, and even still Trump would be underwater on a lot of these issues, including Epstein, including immigration, including the economy. And then if you look at the situation in Wyoming there, my co-panelist, John Heilemann, will know the one place in Wyoming where you can find a Democrat, that's Jackson Hole. I was quickly looking at Google Maps here while you were talking to see how close we were to Jackson Hole in that town hall. It was about a 2-hour drive. So she was in real Wyoming, okay? She wasn't in the ski towns. Yeah. She was in Pinedale in real Wyoming. Wyoming getting shouted down about Jeffrey Epstein, about the big beautiful bill, et cetera. And, I'm sure there are a couple of Democrats in Pinedale, but I think that speaks to the fact that, there's unhappiness out there that is cross-partisan in the country.
It's interesting to me, John Hellman, that some of the newest pieces of the Trump coalition seem to be his weakest. You've got, let me just read this. Reuters has Hispanic voter support showing, let me just read it. The latest poll showed Hispanics, a group that swung toward Trump in last year's election, have soured on the president. Some 32% approve of his performance in the White House, matching their lowest level of approval for Trump this year. And then the much ballyhooed manosphere, here's Joe Rogan on how he feels about how immigration's going.
It was a visceral reaction that a lot of people had to the idea of people just showing up and pulling people out of schools and pulling people out of Home Depot and pulling people that were just hardworking people that maybe snuck over here because they didn't have a legal way to get over here. But since they've been here, they've been good people and they're a part of communities. And that's what freaks people out, because when people thought about ICE, they thought, great, we're going to get rid of the gang members. They didn't think, great, you're going to get rid of a landscaper.
Your thoughts?
Well, you're putting your finger on the most important thing, Nicole. And I'm just going to try to like connect a few of these dots. Tim just said that Trump is not in free fall. He's not in free fall. He's been underwater in terms of his net approval rating, approval, disapproval, since the middle of June. Okay. And it's been pretty constant. It bumps up and down a little bit, but he's been net negative underwater for 2 solid months. On all of the issues that he was strong on inflation and the economy, he was strong on coming into office. On inflation, the economy, that's the first place he went underwater on the issue. He went underwater on that issue in February. He went underwater on trade. He went underwater on trade in March. The only big issue that he didn't go underwater on for a long while was immigration. And in the middle of June, he went underwater on immigration. His immigration numbers did tank, in fact, in June. That number tanking is part of why that's the moment when he overall went underwater, because immigration was the strongest issue he had. And to point to the thing that you just mentioned, what are the groups that he suddenly has where the bottom has fallen out? The bottom has fallen out for him with a lot of Hispanic voters who were crucial to his victory in 2024. And a lot of Hispanic voters had the same attitude as Joe Rogan right there, which was they were, to the surprise of some on the left, they wanted to see the border closed. And they're perfectly fine with seeing criminal gang members, actual criminal gang members, actual people who are doing harm to anyone, anywhere. They're happy with seeing those people sent home. They are more upset than anyone about the notion of the ICE secret police rolling up in front of Home Depot, rolling up in front of Circuit City, rolling up in front of wherever, and basically tossing people in the back of cars and taking them away.
It's becoming clear the Trump administration has calculated a plan to get rid of its Jeffrey Epstein problem, which erupted into a MAGA world civil war after the White House backtracked on its promise to release the Epstein files that are in the possession of the Department of Justice. Now, the administration has been doing everything it can to change the subject, including, I would submit, most recently, the ongoing full-scale military crackdown against our fellow Americans who reside in the nation's capital. But Donald Trump's Epstein problem hasn't actually gone away. A lot of people still want to know what exactly is in the files that DOJ is so reluctant to release. Now, it's possible we might start to get some answers after Friday, although there's a big asterisk. That's when the DOJ hands over the first tranche of redacted files in response to a House Oversight Committee subpoena. That's Shane Comer, the chair of that. He's a Republican. A spokesperson for the committee says the committee will review the files and release them to the public. Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett, Democrat of Texas, serves on that oversight committee, and she joins me now. Congresswoman, it's good to have you. I want to read what Robert Garcia, who's a ranking member on that committee, had to say. He said, releasing the Epstein files in batches just continues this White House cover-up. The American people will not accept anything short of the full, unredacted Epstein files. You agree with Congressman Garcia?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, transparency is is what the people are asking for. And anything that it seems like you are trying to filter out will only bring about more questions and concerns. I think right now the president knows that he really got himself into a pickle. This is something that he campaigned on, and ultimately it's something that he didn't deliver on, which frankly, that is what Trump is known for doing. But for whatever reason, this has been one of those sticking points for his base, and he has tried to distract and destroy communities, as you're talking about D.C., in order to get people to focus on something other than the Epstein files. But the people are zoned in and wanting to know what is in them.
I mean, how's this process going to work? I guess I just feel like, so DOJ is going to give Comer some files, and Comer says that William Barr has already testified to the fact that he didn't see he had no reason to believe Donald Trump committed a crime, which is like, okay. Who's going to do this? Is it committee staff, and is it going to be bipartisan staff? Like, are Democrats going to have any involvement, or this is just like James Comer gets to kind of choose as he likes to?
No, we absolutely should be demanding to be a part of this. Let's not forget that the Republicans wanted to send us home so that they could avoid any questions around even subpoenaing any documents, let alone the entirety of the Epstein files. And it was the representative out of Pennsylvania, Summer Lee, who is the ranking member for a subcommittee on oversight, who then initiated this process when they thought, you know what, we're in the clear. We recessed. And Summer said, not so fast. And so she was able to get the subpoena done in a bipartisan way. I will say that the chairman really did drag his feet and took his time in crafting that subpoena. But we finally did get the subpoena out, and we know that those documents are due to us. I am waiting on the list of excuses that the DOJ has for why they can't turn in the entirety of the file on time. I am waiting on it. I am anticipating it. But I think that right now, the Republicans are the ones that are struggling because, again, this was their campaign promise. Democrats were out there campaigning on things such as the economy and education and housing. And, well, we were trying to give the American people something that would better their lives. But seemingly the Republicans were zoned in on the Epstein files. And right now, we know that the Republicans have torn the economy apart. So the one thing they need to do to hopefully hold on to some semblance of their base is to give them some assurances that they are finding out who was involved with Epstein.
I want to ask you about something happening in your home state of Texas. You were a state legislator in Texas before you came to Congress. We've all been following the story of the extremely rare, abnormal, pure, nakedly partisan attempt to redistrict mid-decade just to jack up the numbers for Republicans, to make it more difficult for the American people to essentially choose their own representatives instead of have the representatives choose their people. Democratic members of the state legislature have broken quorum to try to slow this down. There's one member now, Nicole Collier, who is essentially kind of locked inside the state capitol right now. They usually see her sleeping because she wouldn't sign a permission slip that they made her. Have you been? What do you think about what's going on in your old place of work?
Yeah, again, we're living in a country of lawlessness. This is unconstitutional. This is someone who has not been accused of a crime whatsoever. In fact, just the opposite. I mean, there are definitely people that needed to be locked up in the state of Texas, starting with our attorney general, who had been under federal investigation for a number of years, who had been under felony indictment for a number of years, who was impeached by his own party. Yet he never saw any lockup come to him. And obviously, you know how I feel about the president and where he should be right now. But instead, it is a lawmaker who had the audacity to speak up for her constituency and, frankly, speak up for the Constitution and the rule of law overall. And they decided that because they were not being good little Democrats and doing as they were told, that once those warrants expired, most people didn't understand that the warrants that they issued, the civil warrants, are only good during the session in which they are issued. Well, once that session ended, which it ended, that meant that there was now not a warrant. So now what they said is you must voluntarily sign a permission slip for people to track you so that you come to work and don't leave again in order to ring the alarm on what's happening. So my former colleague, Nicole Collier, said, I'm not doing it. I'm not signing it. And they said, well, then we will break the law and we will unlawfully detain you here at the Capitol.
I should note that your former colleague has filed a habeas petition because she basically says she's essentially being imprisoned by the Texas state legislature at this point, government?
That is, yeah, that's an absolute proper thing to file. You file a writ of habeas when there is someone who is a government actor and has illegal custody over your body, and they then have to come and say, this is why we're able to detain you. They are violating her civil rights. Like, there is no question about it. We don't have anything that is available that allows you to restrict a person's freedom from moving about because they failed to sign this bootleg made up permission slip for somebody to then stalk you and be around you 24/7.
Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett, who did serve in that Texas Capitol for a number of years. Thank you so much for your time. California Governor Gavin Newsom and his team have figured out a very entertaining way to deal with Donald Trump at his own rhetorical level. They've got a new social media strategy that is both, I got to say, pretty damn funny and I think extremely effective, mocking the president with a spot-on impression of his very weird communication style. Since Newsom jumped into the ongoing redistricting fight, his official Twitter account has been posting Trump style. Donald is finished. He is no longer hot. First the hand, so tiny. And now me, Gavin C. Newsom, have taken away his step. Many are saying we can't even do the big stairs on Air Force One anymore. Uses the little baby stairs now. Sad. Has all the Trump trademarks, all capital letters, random quotation marks, little parentheticals, complete unhinged absurdity. From just this morning, I thought this was a good one. I hate Kid Rock. GCN. Reference to Trump's infamous I hate Taylor Swift. Another drags the vice president into it. Not even JD Just Dance Vans can save Trump from the disastrous Maps war he has started. Not even his eyeliner lines look as pretty as California map lines. He will fail, as he always does. Sad, and I, the peacetime governor of our nation's favorite, will save America once again. Many are now calling me Gavin Christopher Columbus Newsom because of the maps. Thank you for your attention to this matter. Beyond the mockery of Trump's text posts, Newsom has also been posting Trump-style AI-generated images of himself, including this, I think, absolute masterpiece of Newsom deep in a moment of reflection or prayer, flanked by 3 MAGA icons and the laying of hands, Kid Rock, who he hates, Tucker Carlson, and the angelic spirit of the recently departed Hulk Hogan. Again, a spot-on mockery of Trump, who isn't doing any of this satirically. What has been equally hilarious has been to watch the joke just go soaring over the heads of Trump's sycophants in the media.
For the last week, Gavin Newsom, why am I giving him advice? You have to stop it with the Twitter thing. I don't know where his wife is. If I were his wife, I would say, "What? You are making a fool of yourself. Stop it. Do not let your staff tweet. And if you're doing it yourself, put the phone away and start over. And if you really, he's got a big job as governor of California, but if he wants an even bigger job, he has to be a little bit more serious."
Yes, right. Be more serious. Stop posting exactly like the President of the United States does. Newsom's account responded to that advice, quote, Dana Ding Dong Perino, never heard of her until today, is melting down because of me, Gavin C. Newsom. Fox hate that I am America's most favorite governor, ratings king, saving America. Trump has lost his step and Fox is losing it because when I type, America now wins. Thank you for your attention to this matter. Again, it is a stark reminder with someone else doing it of how truly, utterly deranged our current president sounds whenever he communicates. And also how accustomed we've all become to this very, very weird behavior.
The reality of it is Donald Trump wants to take the DOJ, the FBI, the military, and make them all a part of his own personal little cadre of police and enforcers. That's it. And I just wish people would get off their behinds and understand exactly what's at stake. Because, Sarah, the reality of it is that Donald Trump, at the end of the day, will do this and continue to do this until he's stopped. He's always operated that way. And it kills me why no one's figured that stuff out. Not Democrats, not Republicans, not the media. No one has figured out that he will continue to exact the price on this democracy until someone stops him. So here's the question. Not who will stop him, because I think at this point we're kind of past that. But on the other side of this fall, as we move into the fall, we get set up for the November elections next year. Do you think the American people will stop him? Do you think there is outside these walls and the walls of a lot of people with big titles and fancy cars that the American people themselves will say, you know what? We've just had enough of this BS. It is time to get our house in order, to focus on our families, our jobs, and our communities, and move the country forward as opposed to wallowing in the funk of Donald Trump's brain?
I think there are a lot of Americans across the country who are upset with this administration because they've seen him break campaign promise after campaign promise. He said he would lower grocery prices. He said he would protect Medicaid. Yeah. He said he would release the Epstein files. He said he would end the war in Ukraine on day one. I could keep going. And you see that the Republicans, specifically Donald Trump, are already trying to cheat in the 2026 elections with what they're doing in Texas.
That's it.
Exactly, because you shouldn't have to redraw the maps if you knew that you were going to do well in the midterms. And so it shows me that they know that they're worried about heading into the midterms because Americans are not happy with what they've seen from this administration, majority of the policies, I would say. I think there are some things that some voters are happy with that he's done, maybe in terms of immigration, for example. They think, okay, well, that's why I voted for him. But I think that some of those voters also think that he's gone a step too far when it comes to something like immigration. And so I think that you're going to see in the midterms these voters come out and push back because they're not seeing from the elite across this country people pushing back. I think Kamala Harris put it really well when she was interviewed on Stephen Colbert's show a few weeks back, where she said, none of this has surprised me. I guessed all this would happen, but it's the capitulation that's been surprising because we've seen corporation, tech moguls, universities, law firms, they've all caved to him. And so to your point that he is going to just try to see how much he can get away with until he stopped. And so it's going to take we, the people, the voters, to stop him. And
are we, the people, ready to show up?
That's the question, right? Because the other thing is, someone has to convince we, the people, that things need to change. Right. Because they can feel it themselves, but at the same time, you have to get people to go out and vote. When you think of the midterms, the kind of folks that get out, they're already kind of rabid and excited. You need the other folks who aren't rabid and excited. But I want to also get back, Brendan, back to the kind of selective justice that Trump has. This is from the New York Times. The headlines, Trump's selective stance on justice, redemption for some, scorn for others. Mr. Trump himself, a felon, they like to point that out, has shown particular leniency to criminals he seems to identify with, people who are white or wealthy or who he believes have been unfairly persecuted or who rioted in his name on January 6th. Also in the article, this quote from him, they will never be an asset to society, he said. I don't care. I know we all want to say, oh, they're going to be rehabbed. They're not going to be rehabbed. That was when he was holding up 5 mugshots of all people of color. What's the difference there? What do you read from that?
This is a president who got his political start by trying to undermine the legitimacy of the first black president. The racism of this man and this candidate is baked into everything that he does. One of the things that's saddest for me, hearing that quote and comparing it to what happened on January 6th and the subsequent pardons, is with January 6th, you had an overwhelmingly white riot against a perhaps majority or near majority minority police force. I talked to a lot of officers, and one of them said something that has stuck with me for several years now. He said, look, I have worked a lot of riots in my career, but this is the first riot that I worked where the rioters thought that they were right. They thought that they were the ones that were in charge. And what scares me is when you see the president using such racist or racialized language like this, it risks legitimizing what those rioters believed and proves them correct.
Well, since you put the race thing on the table,
I just want to say, there's a lot of melding around the table.
I just drop it back here, and anybody can play with it if they want to. But that kind of brings me to D.C. And what we're seeing playing out here in Chocolate City, with actually a little bit more mocha these days.
Nowadays, yeah.
But that element, to your point, is always been an essential thread that's woven throughout a lot of the things that Donald Trump has said and done. And I'm curious as we, I talked about the upcoming elections and we talked about how the Justice Department and all that responds to it. I don't know, Laura, if if the country is looking at it through that prism as well, when, you know, because they like to fixate on the fact that, oh, Hispanic men have moved towards Donald Trump, black men have moved towards Donald Trump. And I'm like, okay, that's the excited utterances of elections and the failure of Democrats to actually get off the dime and do the job, all right? But what is that? Does it say more about that moment, or does it also say that Trump can still get away, going back to my point, get away with dumping on a community like Washington, D.C., largely African-American, Hispanic community? When you go to, you know, up to Morgan, the Petworth area and places like that, what does that say to the voters when they look at that piece of it? Does that resonate, do you think, with them from your reporting and coverage of these stories?
I think that potentially it could. I think we're seeing that President Trump's numbers on things like immigration, which he's often used to demonize Latinos across the country, that he's not necessarily doing as well as he was previously on that issue with voters. But you also see that right now in Washington, D.C., the president and the administration and the White House are trying to dominate the narrative. And you're not seeing much pushback against the administration from other figures across the country, Democratic figures, when it comes to how they are framing this. And just today, the White House was out saying that, you know, trying to spin the numbers, essentially saying that 48% of non-immigration arrests made in D.C. since they started this operation are in the crime-ridden areas of D.C., in Ward 7 and 8. But when you actually put that another way, that's less than half of the arrests, meaning the majority of the arrests are actually not in crime-ridden areas.